Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Tell Your Story. I'm your host, Todd Nesloni, the Director of Culture and Strategic Leadership at TEPSA. And each episode, I look to bring you a different guest who has encouraged, inspired, or challenged me in one way or another, and bring them on to share some of their story in hopes that it inspires you to share some of yours. I am thrilled today to have my special guest, Stephanie Patton, on with me. Stephanie, tell everybody a little bit about who you are.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Patton, and I'm currently the head of school at Columbus City Preparatory School for Girls, which is an all-girls public middle school in Columbus, Ohio, one of the only public all-girl middle schools.
Wow. Okay. I have so many questions I'm going to want to dive into about that because, just yesterday I had a guest on who worked for a while at an all boys Latin school. So this will be a great to kind of hear the other side. So before I even jump into that, Stephanie, when we grow up, we always have ideas of what we think we want to be. And so was educator always in your mind, or did you kind of fall into that later?
I come from a history of educators. However, when I went to college and I started off, I was in actually accounting. And I decided that being indoors and in a confined space and pretty much working in isolation was not something that I really wanted to do. And so I kind of looked at the educational field to see, what I could transfer over. And I always loved like news and history and nonfiction. So I decided to become a social studies teacher, and from there, I knew that was the right place for me.
I love so then when you decided education was your path, you kind of were leaning to more towards secondary than elementary?
Definitely. I think I couldn't do elementary. That the little kids is just you have to have a special heart for that. So
Yeah.
for me, middle school, high school is my passion, is my love. Secondary, and definitely dealing with teenagers and girls at that age.
I love that. And I think you're so right. I think we either know if we're built for elementary or secondary, and very few of us can do both. And
Right.
so, well, Stephanie, at some point in your career while teaching, you view administration as part of your path. And so, when did that kind of interest start building into you?
So as a teacher, I always found myself helping and doing more for administration,
Mhm.
being the team leader, being
Mhm.
innovative about, how do we make sure our students are successful. So from there, I decided to go back to school and get my master's in educational leadership, and then, apply to be in that role of assistant principal and then to head principal.
So now that you've been principal for a few years now, and an administrative role period for many years, what do you feel like is something you've really learned about yourself through that?
I think how to transfer my experiences to be beneficial for the students that I have now. I was not the model student. I did not
Mhm.
have straight A's, and so there were a lot of
Mhm.
barriers and challenges that I look back and say I wish someone could have helped me then.
Right.
So that I didn't have to deal with some of those obstacles. So I think for me, that relationship piece and that connection piece was
Right.
something that I learned over time. I'm an only child. I have a son, only child, so it's not like I had that big familial
Yeah.
experience. And so I had to learn that and
Right.
then, saw it blossom with students and staff.
Now I noticed for a few years as well, you were a turnaround coach and really helping schools who were struggling kind of figure out what their needs were and help solve them. And so, when did that become of interest to you to kind of jump into that role for a little bit?
So I like to problem solve. And so for
Mhm.
me, I really love going into the most challenging schools and seeing the progress of change and turning them around. And so through a series of different appointments, I would go into schools that needed school improvement
Right.
and was really successful at it. And so I then looked at the Ohio Department of Education, and they had created this school improvement basically organization within their
Mhm.
department, and I joined them as a turnaround specialist, and I would go in and coach principals on how to turn schools around, and I really enjoyed that.
I love that. We've got something similar to that in Texas, and so I totally know exactly kind of what you're talking about. And so, did you see any commonalities between schools that were struggling that you were working with?
I think systems in place. I think
Mhm.
sometimes when you're in a very energy high charge situation, sometimes you are just, putting out fires or
Mhm.
creating in the moment. And I think that when you slow down and set up a system in place that suits your needs and your student needs, I think then you start to come out of that chaos and that burnout, that so many educators get in those situations.
And I think you just hit the nail on the head right there, is making sure that those systems are in place instead of just flying by the seat of your pants all the time. And Stephanie, you said earlier that you are now the head of school at an all-girl public school. And did I hear you correctly? It's the only all-girl public school in the area?
Yes, in the state
And
of
so
Ohio.
in the whole state.
Hmm.
Wow. So how did you find this school?
So I was actually in a higher needs school doing school improvement. And my supervisor came to me and she was being promoted to executive director. And they were just saying that based on just how I present myself, how I model myself, how I'm goal oriented, they felt that I would be the perfect person for that position. And at first, I was a little hesitant because, like I said, I have a son.
Yeah.
I don't do the whole all girls thing. I don't have a lot of girlfriends. So I was kind of hesitant. Like, I don't know, working with
Yeah.
all women and, then having all students that are girls, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And so I think, after my first year of really getting to understand what single gender education is about and how girls learn, then I just grasped it and I really, I love it now.
And I'm so interested in this because sometimes the single gender education that I've heard about is just in the movies and stuff. Like, I don't have any personal experience with a school like that, and it interests me so much to imagine what a school environment would be like with a single gender. And so, what are you noticing now, having worked in both environments, that are some of the biggest differences?
I think that's an excellent question because I think when I came over to the girls' school, I thought, well, I taught girls before. I've
Mhm.
been a principal with girls. What's the difference? And the way that they learn and the confidence that my girls display, I think, is something that is separated from a dual gender setting. And so my girls, they understand their leaders, they get the expectations, they'll compete, with the boys' school, and we have competitions, and so they're like strong in math and science. And so I think that it gives an opportunity to allow them to use their voice more and other strategies of building confidence that you may not get in a dual gender school because you're competing with a more dominant force. So in our mission statement, it says that my girls will be able to compete in a boardroom if it's a male dominated environment.
I
So
love that. And I can just imagine all the possibilities that open up when you've got that single gender environment. And so, now having been there a couple years,
mhm.
I'm sure you've had to learn some things that you didn't expect to learn being in that environment. What's something unexpected that you've learned about yourself or being in that environment?
I think that I set the tone. And
Mhm.
so if there's a day, every morning I do a morning meeting. And so I meet with my girls, we do a quote, we do something. But, like everybody, there's days where you don't necessarily want to get up and rah rah the troops. And so they will take on my personality. So if I go up and I'm dry or, cold with it, then that's kind of the kind of day we have. And so I had to go back in and do that self reflection. And also with girls, if they're not feeling me, like I get the collective 300 eye roll, not just one or two. I get the entire, or like, that's an interesting choice of a skirt you have on, Miss Patton, So those things I don't necessarily have in a dual gender that with
Yeah.
girls is quite special. They'll keep you sharp.
I bet. I bet the amount of honesty they portray in that environment is definitely one that keeps you humble and keeps you
Yes.
on your toes for sure. And
Yes.
Stephanie, you've had quite success. You've experienced a lot of different environments. You clearly love what you're doing. But what I found through these conversations is no amount of success or pride can take away sometimes that lingering doubt that sometimes begins to creep in about our own worth and what we bring to the table and how good we are at what we do. And so, how do you personally keep doubt at bay so that it doesn't consume you?
That's a great question. I think, and we struggle with that with our girls a lot. And I'll say, like, I build you up. You have all this confidence, and we're good on a day to day, and then you get an opportunity, and you doubt yourself, right? And
Right.
so, moving into this next realm of sharing my practices, nationwide, and being featured in the documentary, I start to have the doubt of how to move to that next. Does everybody really want to talk about girls? And what I'm doing, is it that different? So I think that you just have to keep remembering that you're doing it for the girls and you're doing
Yeah,
it for education, which is your passion, and it's above who I am at this point. It's basically what I do. So that's
yeah.
what I have to keep in mind.
Now, did you just say featured in a documentary?
Yes.
So tell me about that. That's amazing.
So Dr. Monique Morris does a lot of extensive research on the criminalization of Black girls. And so she wrote a
Mhm.
book called Push Out, that really explores some of the things that you've seen lately in the news, where you have 5-year-old girls handcuffed to a chair. A
Right.
girl was being body slammed because she refused to give up her cell phone by the resource officer. And I met Dr. Morris through a community event. And I said, well, hey, come visit our school. And the things that she saw that we were doing, providing safe spaces,
Mhm.
support for our young ladies, she asked if she could, document some of those things that we were doing. And it became a national documentary that was nominated for a Essence Award, the NAACP award.
That is incredible. And what is it called?
It's called Push Out, the criminalization of Black girls, and it's at pushoutfilm.com. It's showing on PBS. So if you go to your local PBS app or
Yeah.
station, they're showing it there.
I am definitely gonna check that out. That whole idea is so interesting to me. Like the one of a show that I've watched recently on Netflix is Girls Incarcerated, and seeing kind of how the system treats our youngest kids, especially girls, and how there's so many issues. And one thing I want to ask you, Stephanie, is you work in an all-girls school. You work in a really diverse area of your state, and a conversation I had yesterday with a gentleman was just this idea of, with everything that we constantly see popping up in the news lately, whether it is Mr. Avery, whether it is another young lady who was just on the news recently about being shot in her home. How do we, or how do you, keep your own students from internalizing what they see on the news and feeling like that's part of their story? Like, how do you keep them believing that they are worthy of greatness and that they have amazing things inside of them when they see a system that keeps letting them down?
Yeah, and I think that's a great lesson to learn when you're young, that the world is not kind. And
Right,
you, especially being a Black woman or a Black girl. And so,
right,
how do you navigate that world? And so, first of all, you have to teach them the two rules to live by, and how to use your voice, and how to, navigate through those things. And then to, make them believe they are resilient. And you have to continually do cultural relevant curriculum where you're seeing women, Rosa Parks, Harriet Tubman, others who have gone on despite the situation. And I have to remind them, this isn't the first time in history where
yeah,
we as African Americans have faced these problems. Let's look back further into history, into the 20s, into slavery, when there were things that, happened similar, and how did we overcome and overachieve? We're always going to survive, but you have to map out how that looks for you. And so
yeah.
we take on that social justice piece that we put in our curriculum to remind them of that daily.
And I love that. And you just said something there. You said the 1920s, and that just is, it's such a troubling reminder to know that so many painful things that have happened in our country's past was only in the last 100 years. And so when
Mhm.
you look at that and think all that we've been through, and so how do you encourage others to rise up alongside of your girls in your schools to speak out for them and be there and help stand alongside them?
I think that we have to professionally develop our staffs. We
Mhm.
have to do, a reflection on our own biases, and then remember why we're there. So if our barriers and challenges are being Black females, then you have to advocate for them, whether you're a Black female or a white female or white
Right.
male. We all have the same goal and mission. And so if we're teaching our children to be advocates, how dare us sit back and not advocate for
Mhm.
those same very students? So I just have that same message to, the staff I work with the community. These are our expectations. These are what my girls
Mhm.
expect. If you can't come in and provide the quality that they're looking for, then maybe it's best that we move forward in a different direction.
And I think what you said there was beautiful is that we can't ask our kids to advocate for themselves if we're not also advocating for them and making sure that we, as the adults, are educating ourselves on our own biases, our own fragility, our own weaknesses, and making sure that we stand alongside them and not just say, hey, speak up for yourself to this. Like, we have to join them in the fight. And so I love what you said there. Well, Stephanie, switching gears just a little bit, when you reflect on your own life and you think about all the things you've been through in your life, the joys, the successes, the failure, the pain, the happiness, when you are reflecting, what is one experience that you look back on and think that was pretty instrumental into creating the woman we see today?
I think for me, I appreciate the hardships, and I tell people that, it was not an easy ride for me. What you see now, the suit, the car, that lifestyle has not always been. My mom
Mhm.
was 19 when she had me, and she was a single mother. And so there are a lot of things that I didn't know. And I think
Right.
that, in particular, there were people that stepped up for me. And had they not have stepped up for me, even if I didn't see it at the time, I don't believe that I would be where I am. And so it only takes that one adult to change a trajectory of a child. And so I always try to keep that in mind as I'm moving forward, because there were people that definitely stepped in and played a part for me, because this is the end result of all of the hard work and, like you said, the good times and the bad times. And
Right.
that's what they see, but they don't understand I'm on that same journey that you're on,
Mhm.
and so let me help you.
I love that. That was wonderful. So, Stephanie, one question that I always love to end all these conversations on is that I believe as people, there are things we hold really close to our hearts and our beliefs and are just the foundation of who we are. And so, for anybody listening or watching today, if there was one thing that you would want them to take away, what would your one thing be?
I think just work on authentic relationships with people in a diverse setting. I think that we
Mhm.
all need to, share those common interests, to understand that we all have similar experiences and we're all going through similar things at one point of time or another. And so that connection and that authenticity, I think, is just very important. And it's a path that you have to go on to find your authentic self. And so I would just say, be unapologetically you, and that's what I tell my girls. And just try to survive in this crazy place right now.
Well, Stephanie, I admire the work you are doing so much. I was so excited when you agreed to come on today. I cannot wait to check out this documentary. And so, thank you so much for spending a few
Thank
minutes with
you.
me today for Tell Your Story.
All right, thank you for having me.
And thank you, everybody, for listening or watching another episode of Tell Your Story. Remember, you can check out past episodes on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, wherever you get it, it's there. I hope today's conversation with Stephanie has encouraged you to get out there and tell your story because every story matters.